Hey, remember just yesterday in high school when we had to cover our textbooks with an old grocery sack? Well, I've got one better, one that'll last a lifetime, one using Kraft Tex. Let's get started. That's right. One of the best things about being able to sew is we can make awesome gifts for our friends. This was a fantastic gift that was given to me. Thanks, Val. I absolutely love it. This is a custom-made cloth journal cover. You often see it over here on the set at Man Sewing. One of my pieces of inspiration I have back there to keep me moving and motivated. And like I said, I was also inspired for today's tutorial by thinking about those old brown sack book covers. And with the brown sack book covers, it started making me think, let's get rugged. What are we going to use that's going to be awesome and rugged and last a lifetime? And so I started using the Kraft Tex, which is a fantastic fiber. It's put out by C&T. Comes on these big rolls, so you have plenty to work with for any size journal cover. Today's video, I'm going to break down how to make the cover, and then I'm going to talk about the applique. So you can do big, or you could do something small like that that you could keep in your purse or in your handbag, right? But I am ready to make this background. Let's get started. Okay, I'm going to lay these steps out for you, whether you're making the small little journal cover or the big journal cover. This math is kind of going to be generic and loose so that you can follow along. I want to show you the finished part so you understand what we're doing as we make the journal cover. So the first thing is I'm going to call this back the spine. This is the outside spine or the skinny part of the journal. Also on the journal, we're going to be making an inner sleeve that we're going to fit there. And then as I start to unpack this, you're going to also see that I have these two small sleeves that come up from the bottom edges. And on this particular one, I have stitched around all of my applique pieces. So all of the stitching of the applique would be done first before we do the top stitching that you see around the outer edge. So we're going to talk about that as we're breaking this down. So the first thing you need to do is take the journal, whatever size you're going to do, big or small, and measure it. And once you measure it, I want you to go roughly 8 inches longer and 4 inches taller than the journal itself so that you can make those sleeves I just showed you. The first creases come from finding the center point of the long distance. So mine happened to be 26. So at 13 was my center point. And that center point is actually the middle of your spine. So when I laid this on my center point, I happened to measure about 1.5 inches worth of spine. So 3/4 on either side. Sorry about all the math. I told you it'd be generic. Okay. So we just want to make a crease big enough for our spine. And when I'm making my creases, what I like to do is I like to use my ruler and I fold it first up against my ruler like yay. And then as I fold it all the way over, I take the blunt end of an object like my rotary cutter. I make sure that I'm lined up on both sides. And then I give a nice press, making sure my blade's always covered, of course, when using it that way. And you want to make sure you're only making the creases you really want. The creases will always show over time, so we want to make sure we're being accurate as we do those. So you have a crease on either side of the spine, okay? Then the next creases I actually do is I am going to go ahead and come up 1 inch or, well, I'm sorry, I said make it 4 inches. So you're going to come up roughly 2 inches from the bottom. And we're going to also come up roughly 2 inches from the top. And I want to point out here, if you look really close, my cover is slightly larger than the journal itself. And we're going to need that because when we top stitch, we're going to do basically like a 1/4 inch or a scant 1/4 inch around. So we're buying in that distance. Okay. And then the other folds are made by keeping your spine in the contact there of the cover and finding where these edges go. Those edges, you're also going to want to have about 1/4 inch on either side so that you can make sure it folds open and close nice and easy like yay, and that we can also top stitch around. So you want to make sure the journal cover itself works perfectly before we do any of our decorating. Now Kraft Tex is awesome because you can decorate in a million different ways. Now of course when it comes to decorating, you could paint on the Kraft Tex, you can use Sharpie markers or those are cool acrylic paint pens, you can even decoupage regular fabric down. That's kind of where my mind started with this, but I thought I want to make applique using Kraft Tex as well because it comes in all of these really cool and mountain-like colors for our mountain or our nature scene today. So go ahead and zip down into the description below and print yourselves out the printables. I want to point out we have 2 pages for you. We have the trees and the moon, and we also have the mountains and the snow cap. They've been reversed or transposed. So if you're using this with fusible web and regular fabric, it's already backwards for you. as well as when we trace onto our Kraft Tex, all of our markings will be on the back, so we don't have to cut so perfectly. Now let me show you what I'm talking about though when I say markings. Here you can see one of the cutouts from our large tree, right? And what I did in order to get that cutout set up on there is I simply took a piece of my old-fashioned wax paper, right? And I set it between the layers where I also had my big tree. And I'll just do this real quick, making sure it fits, right? And then I like to use a red pen so I know where I've already traced around. And you want to put some good pressure down. So you're just going to come in here and you're going to trace around that tree or whatever design you're doing, right? Anything that you can draw or you can print out that's a free piece of clip art or something, you can create an applique from. And I'm not even worrying about the lines right now. I'm just giving you the idea of what I'm doing because I'm not even looking at where I'm tracing right now. And the fun part is if you look at our printable really close, and I'll show you in a second when I'm done with my red lines, but the negative space that comes from where you were working is also part of the design. And I'll point those pieces out in just a second. So once you've traced all the way around your tree, and I used the red so I can see where I've been working, it's gonna come right through like that onto your Kraft Tex. And from that point, all you have to do is cut out the tree and you have one of your appliques already made. So I said I would point out in the description on the bottom of our printable that has the mountains, that extra part there, I added in so it can be saved in for these rocks below, kind of finishes the tree off real nice like that. And then also you can see we kind of have a half tree, and the half tree comes from this dotted line area over here, and that is kind of the negative space, so you only have to really cut it out once and it makes two trees. And any scraps that you have or any negative space that you have, of course you can use to make other parts of your design as you are being creative on your own. Now let me show you how I lay these out as we walk through this, okay? The first thing I like to start with, and I pointed out, I've already transposed or flipped the design so that all your marking is on the back. So you should have nice, clean images coming down without any marking showing there. And so I start with my mountain range and I put it almost at about half in the middle of the journal there. And then I'm gonna bring in my snow caps for my mountains just like that. And then my large tree, I kind of start and I kind of place it near the bottom. When I do my top stitching, I can catch some of these things at the bottom, and so or as well as I can trim before I do my top stitching. So like these parts that are hanging off, no problem. And then I'm going to take my half tree and I'm going to set it over here, and I'm going to take my other tree and I'm going to set it kind of on the front, and then this little set of extra rocks is used to cover that up just like that. And then of course, if you want it to be a fun nighttime, I would put the moon in there. And I like to keep my moon kind of opposite of the big trees just to kind of keep the weight and the balance of the journal cover looking nice. Now, I want to show you the two different ways that you can apply your applique. So if you want to top stitch like I did here, and I will say, I love to free motion machine quilt, and I think I'm pretty slick at it. I did struggle a little bit, and the reason is because of the needle itself was kind of going nice and slow to stay, going through the Kraft Tex, but also stay on target. So use a Sharps style needle for your free motion. Take it nice and slow, and if you're gonna do the free motion work, because of the way it's gonna fit inside of the sleeve, you need to do all of your sewing first, and then do your top sewing of the edge. So all of that stitching is down in there. Hopefully you can see that nice. So all your top stitching, all your free motion quilting around your applique first. And if you are sewing it down, I'm going to recommend strongly you just use the lapel stick. The lapel stick is a nice bond, but it's not going to put a bunch of thickness there that we're going to have to needle through later. And if you're doing that, you're basically going to just take and apply it to the back side of your trees or your mountains or whatnot. So it doesn't take much, and you actually don't even need to get it all the way out to the edge. You're just holding the body of that down. Okay, so I just have a little bit of glue up and down the center there. And then I would come back in and I would press this down like yay. And I'm going to hold it in place for a little bit, and I might even weight this down a little bit before I do any of the machine sewing. Now, if you don't want to do the machine sewing and have yours turn out like this, and it is a little bit more rigid and stiff because I've used the glue, this here is my fabric fuse that I love so much. Now it's got this tiny little applicator tip. So when you're using it, what you might want to do is put your glue down, and I'm No, I'm being risky doing it right on top of the journal here, but we're gonna put our glue down, and because it's gonna run a little bit, I'm not putting it right up to the edge, and I'm using a very thin bead, but I do wanna come out into these little tips a little bit so it will hold down nice over time. If you wanted to take and use the actual tip itself and spread it out so that we don't have a big glob or goo ball in there that's going to squish out when we're done. So we're going to get it out to the edges. And what I did, because I wasn't sure, I like to stitch because I wanted to hold it in place, right? Is I made my sample piece here, and then like I can literally not tear this apart here. So this glue is fantastic. And if you get it all the way out to your outer edges of your applique pieces, it will hold forever, just like your journal cover will hold up forever. Now, our very last step we need to do to also secure the outside pieces is we're going to do our top stitching. So I literally just started basically in one corner, and I came and I top stitched all the way around the perimeter, obviously catching the pieces that were along the side. So those were trimmed first, all the way back around to my start point, and that also helps secure the inner pocket that we'll use to slide our journal inside of, right? So now that you have that all set up, you can keep your textbooks nice and clean for the longest time as you bounce back and forth from your locker to the cafeteria, out to the quad to hang out with your buddies and be in party, your clique and everything. And I tell you what, wait, is that what I hear? Is that the bell? Class is dismissed until next week here at Man Sewing.